As the rebound continues here in Tampa Bay, we want to make sure you have everything you need to get yourself through restarting your life. And today, we're going to talk about the most recent guidelines given by the CDC when it comes to allowing kids back into the classroom, going back to school safely. ABC Action News reporter Lauren Royzla has studied the guidelines and gives her thoughts in today's episode. I'm James Tully with ABC Action News, and this is the Rebound Tampa Bay podcast. And now, here's Lauren.
I mean, there are some real concerns. I am wondering how school districts across the state and the country are going to be able to really do this. But I know that school districts right now are trying to work toward drafting and coming up with some of their plans. So a couple of the things that are in this CDC report, and I might add, let's preface this with one important thing. The CDC can put out these guidelines, but they cannot necessarily enforce them. It's up to each local like the state and the local governments to put these in place and enforce them. But this is, kind of like those national
Exactly.
guidelines.
It's kind of to steal a phrase that our colleague Paul LeGros, one of our anchors at ABC Action News, says all the time: all government's local. So when these guidelines come down, they're basically suggestions from a higher authority, and then it's disseminated upon the different municipalities and how they want to enact it. So, do you want to touch on some of the highlights?
Yeah, so I've got them pulled up right here, so I'm going to be kind of looking over
That's
here.
fine.
But a couple of the main things have to do with like scheduled cleaning times and making sure that everything is sanitized. They want to make sure that those high touch surfaces are really taken care of. It's doorknobs, handles, water fountains, all of that stuff. And they want teachers to make sure that they have a place that they store all their cleaning supplies and it's locked away. And another
I'll tell you what we should do, Lauren, is after you go through these highlights, I'm going to ask you if it's feasible or not feasible in your opinion as a journalist, and also with some of the groups you're in. You're in a lot of groups with other mothers and families. So let's do it that way. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Let's start with that. The cleaning in the high contact areas often, and the guidelines call for them to be cleaned how often exactly?
It doesn't say. It's really just often.
Right.
So interpret that how you
exactly,
will.
And that's what I'm looking at too.
I don't know if that means once an hour.
I don't know if it means just overnight after classes go through. So that is open for interpretation. Okay, cleaning the high contact areas often, feasible or not feasible?
Feasible, as long as it's feasible as long as the teachers actually have the supplies in place. This is what I will say. Beginning of every school year, one of the biggest things that teachers ask for: Lysol wipes, tissues, other cleaning supplies for their classrooms, so they can do their own sanitizing. It's not to say that the districts won't provide that, but we just need to make sure that the teachers have those supplies on hand. One other thing with the cleaning: ventilation. They want to make sure that all of these supplies are locked away so students and teachers aren't inhaling any kind of like toxic fumes or anything like that too. So is that feasible?
I think so too.
What do you think?
I think that just follows along what other businesses have already had to do. Whether or not they're actually doing it, how it's being enforced, I'm not sure. I got my hair cut last week for the first time in a very long time. I will say I was impressed with what I saw in the 45 minutes I was there. They seem to be abiding by everything. Not that I didn't think they would, but that required them to only allow a certain amount of people in, and then after every appointment they had to clean. If we're talking about comparing schools to that, are we talking like every other class somebody has to come in? Like, do they have the manpower to do this? Are we asking teachers to do it? I mean, there aren't enough custodians to cover this type of job, depending on how often. So that's where the unfeasibility factor comes in for me. But otherwise, I'm with you. Like, this is stuff we've been trying to do since the pandemic started, is cleaning high contact areas as much as possible, right?
I got one that's going to light a lot of people up. Okay. So this is something that, man, when we talk about feasibility and resources, I have no idea how it's going to be done. Students should be seated with one child per row on the school bus.
Right. I'm so glad you brought this one up, and I hope from this we can go into the classroom with where they want students seated. But let's start with the school bus.
Yeah, that's so.
And it also says skip rows if possible, and I'm thinking, well, I don't have kids that ride the school bus, okay, but
they're jam packed.
That was my next question.
No.
I know I've seen school buses. And when I stop home, if I have to, after a show or whatever, this is right around the time as I like to call them, the cheese wagons are rolling through my neighborhood. They're packed. So what are you going to be asking of certain parents at this point to do?
So this is what I wonder.
Go ahead.
Okay, and I might add, we haven't gotten. We've actually been asking. ABC Action been talking to some of the school districts, and I understand they haven't really given any responses yet, probably because they don't know or can't say, but we don't even have enough school buses, in my opinion, or bus drivers, in my opinion, to handle this. So what does that mean? It would probably be like 15 kids to a school bus. I don't even think we have enough school buses to do that. So,
well, you certainly don't. You definitely. We know for a fact that as late as January, early February, districts were still trying to hire school bus drivers. So this was a big thing. And you know this because you ran our Driving Tampa Bay Forward initiative, and you're still running it on ABC Action News. But we every district, including the largest one, Hillsborough, was dealing with school bus driver shortages all throughout the school year.
Yeah, and so the ones that we are talking with now are also getting special training, and there also is now another layer of, are you willing to be a school bus driver under these new conditions? You know, you would of course be essential, but you'd be exposed to a lot more. And that before we go to what social distancing looks like in the classroom, bus drivers and riders should wear masks is in this list as well of the guidelines. And do I think that's feasible? I mean, yeah, definitely for the bus drivers, I do. I think it seems like there's a huge availability of cloth masks and face masks, disposable ones that people are now having. I don't know, though, if we can expect kids, especially young children, to wear masks on the school bus or in the classroom, even.
Right.
I don't know.
And you can't possibly...
And wear them correctly.
And you also can't expect, at least let's stay on the bus here for a second, you can't expect the bus driver to be able to enforce that at all.
Oh gosh, no.
And you wonder sometimes with these recommendations, you know, it's kind of like, how do I want to put this? It's kind of like, you know, on the back of an aspirin bottle, I've used this analogy before, where it says don't exceed 8 doses in a 24-hour period or something like that. I've had medical professionals tell me, you know, the majority of the public is going to be just fine if they have more than 8 doses, but you're protecting against that slim, you know, minority of people that may not handle that many aspirin that long. You wonder, like, well, with a lot of these guidelines, you know, how overprotective it might be, just to hope that, well, at least if there's an effort made, it's better than nothing, knowing that kids are going to be on the bus, they're going to have the masks down, they're going to have them off, they're not going to put them on at all, they're going to be roughhousing like they normally would because they're kids, especially young, you know, elementary school kids. Behaving on a bus is, you know, that's always an obstacle, right?
We'll see what that looks like. Yeah,
well, I guess we'll see what it looks like. I'm just wondering, like, how much of this is like, well, you know, some is better than none. You know, any kind of attempt is still better, and would we see some data that shows...
I mean, that's a very valid point. It's a very valid point. And, I mean, they really haven't specified, but yeah, maybe something is better than nothing. Maybe an attempt is better than nothing.
Maybe. Well, let's look at the...
So we're talking about the classrooms.
Yeah, well, we can both agree unfeasible then on the buses, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think we both agree there. In the classroom, go ahead, Lauren.
They're trying to do social distancing in the classrooms. So... you know, those one-way hallways that we're seeing at places like Publix and other grocery stores and stuff like that. They're asking to try and do that in the hallways at schools, one-way hallways. They're also asking to try and keep kids all facing the same way. Like, you know, not to date myself, but now, you know, I'm about to turn 33 very, very soon. I grew up in classrooms where everybody was already in desks, all facing the same way in rows. Now it is much more of like pods and group
Mhm.
settings that you'll find in schools, like circular
Sure.
desks and common work areas, like open space type areas and tables. So, what the CDC is recommending is that you do away with those. You get rid of those and you face the kids all in the same direction. I'm assuming that's so that way they're all breathing, coughing, whatever in the same
Direction, not at
direction,
each other at all.
not at each other. But I think that part is feasible. I think the hallways is absolutely
Mhm.
feasible for sure. Do I think the desks are feasible? Yes, to an extent. It's going to take teachers being a little bit more creative with their spacing for
Mhm.
sure. Um, Also, lunch now, well, lunch and breakfast would be in classrooms, not in a cafeteria.
Saw that. So,
Poor
right,
teachers.
you're
Poor
exactly.
teachers.
So, yes, you're taking
Oh,
away that again, another opportunity for kids to be too close together. I mean, so I'm going to say with the classroom, I'm going to give it a feasible. I think that all that can be done. The question is, like, if they do have the pod set up and they have to bring in new desks and things like that, how many districts really have the resources to redo every single classroom? Although I have a good friend who is, works for the Hillsborough County School District, one of the largest districts in the nation, and he told me that he was shocked how quickly they were able to get sanitizing. Equipment and sanitizing, hand sanitizer and other things they needed. He was really amazed how quickly they got it in. So, I'm not going to sell them short. I think that if they need to do it, they're going to absolutely do it. The question, so
absolutely.
yeah,
I
I'm
think so.
feasible on that one. Okay, lunches, breakfasts, all that stuff, eliminating the cafeteria, and then also there's another
Sad, but feasible.
sad but feasible. Food provided by the school here, it says, should be prepackaged in boxes or bags. That's
They kind of already, I mean, not exactly, but okay. So if you think about this right now, in the state of Florida, we're seeing a ton of emergency feeding and we're about to shift into summer
that's
feeding
right.
programs. All that stuff is already boxed and prepackaged. I think it's feasible because they're already doing it to hand out these meals to kids. I think it's just a shift in how they put it together because they're not going to be, would be food service and nutrition workers in the kitchens putting these together and then probably teachers distributing them individually.
Right.
Like I think it's feasible.
I would agree, feasible. Do you want to move on to field trips, group events, extracurricular activities?
All canceled, right?
All suggested to be canceled. Right. So that is going to do away
Sad but
with
feasible.
sad but feasible, very sad when it comes to sports. And that creates a whole other socioeconomic problem, too, for so many
Oh,
families. And that this is, of course, we're talking about all sports. Assemblies, that's easy. Field trips, the suggestion is to make them virtual, as if we haven't had enough of virtual. So, I don't know. When you talk about the gatherings of students in certain areas, I wonder, and I'm surprised that there's nothing in here, at least through what I read, and I read all 15 pages here. I didn't see anything in there about a suggestion to maybe still utilize virtual learning and have the schools open. This was something we talked about last time you were on the pod here, and that would be to have, like, I don't know, designated days that kids stay home and do the virtual learning, and then designated days that those same
which
kids
could
come in.
help with the school bus stuff
Could help with your school
too.
bus stuff. Absolutely, it could.
So I am not prepared to deliver an opinion on what the districts are going to do yet on that, but definitely under consideration across the state. They're weighing out all different sorts of options and what they think is going to work the best for teachers, especially immunocompromised
Mm-hmm.
teachers and teachers who might be in the at-risk age group, and families. But we'll see. I think, but yeah, that could be really interesting. The half and half, or how that would work. There's just so many, James. There's just so many considerations in place here because the workforce is relying on schools as a form of childcare, whether, of course they're learning and it's in,
Very true.
enrichment, but this is a place that kids go, and this is how people can leave the house to go to work.
That's right.
And so if kids are at home half the time, the workforce is going to have to adjust. And I think school district leaders are taking all of those things they're thinking about it. They're thinking about how this is going to affect families, how this is going to affect the local economy. I think it's just so many unknowns right now.
And it could be a situation where, families can apply for this because, of course, not every parent or set of parents, if there is a set or if there's one or whatever the situation is, not all of them can make that work, right? Because of, like you said, they use this school as a form of childcare. Some can. Some can still work from home, and then the state can mandate that their company keep them at home because of their kids. This all is possible. But, again, maybe there's like a sign-up process or an application process or something like that for this. I've thought from the beginning that might be an answer, but that's just what I've seen, what I've read, and what I've reported on. So
I'm really curious. We're pressing school district leaders right now to see kind of what their plans are and how they're going to handle it. My sense is that right now they're trying to figure out the summer. How do we make sure that kids are ready after this break in classes and this huge disruption, both in school and emotional and all of that?
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we are going to know more by beginning of July, mid-July. That is my guess. For parents who are anxiously awaiting to see kind of what their own homeschool district is going to be doing, I would say stay in touch with them on social media, follow their posts, see what they're doing. Check us out, ABC Action News, because we're always going to be pressing them to see what their plan is.
Yes, stay in touch with all of your leaders in your community, and keep following us here on ABC Action News, the Rebound section, and then Lauren's on top of this too. I guess where we are is the only thing you and I both found unfeasible would be some of the things with the buses and also some of the distancing in the classrooms. Some of it is just not, doesn't seem realistic. But that's about it. I mean, everything else,
And if I can kind of, so what we're seeing right now, so if we're thinking about how schools are looking, childcare facilities are now starting to reopen, right?
That's right.
So if we look to them and how the state has established those guidelines for reopening, it's somewhat similar to schools, of course, because of the classrooms. So the governor has just loosened restrictions on the capacity for childcare provider classrooms. So initially, the state was like, hey, you can only have 9 kids to 1 teacher. That's the maximum amount. And so that was really a big problem for a lot of providers. They were afraid that with their capacity slashed, that they wouldn't be able to afford to stay open. So the governor has now loosened those restrictions, said, hey, you can return back to normal capacity. And what we're seeing now, my daughter actually just returned to daycare yesterday. And I've got to tell you, James, it was really wild. But, we've talked before that there's no one more paranoid than I am. I have a lot of concerns about the spread of this virus, that I have been overly cautious. I'm not being in restaurants. I'm wearing masks all the time, all of that. I was so comfortable sending my daughter back to daycare. They are reading temperatures. Could we see that in schools? I have no idea, but they're taking her temperature every day. She is not allowed to, and this is not a part of the state guidelines necessarily. This is just what my daughter's facility is doing, but she cannot wear shoes from the outside of the facility to the inside. She has a pair of shoes that just stay at school. They are washing all of her nap stuff and her extra clothes at the school. They don't leave at all to try and reduce the spread.
Sounds like some rules I have in the Tully house, especially with nap clothes.
It's just good. It's just good hygiene.
No, it's good. It's good to hear you say that, and it sounds like that's definitely. I can hear the relief in your voice. But let me.
How they're going to keep a bunch of 3-year-olds 6 feet apart? beyond me. I don't know how you can keep kids apart that much in a classroom setting, especially with normal capacity. But I do think that they're trying in the masks. All of the providers are in masks, so perhaps teachers will have to wear them. Educators, I don't know. I think it will always be optional for kids because you can't expect them to wear them all day. But like with the childcare thing, if we're using that as the baseline for what it will look like for schools, I'm feeling really positive. And if we're using childcare facilities as the baseline, I'm feeling really positive and hopeful about the future. What it looks like for reopening our schools. I think that they are taking the top health concerns and safety concerns and cleaning and sanitation, all it's all top of mind. So I feel like going toward the fall, parents should feel cautiously optimistic and feel like everything is being done to keep their children safe, their families safe, and to ensure that they can safely return to work when that is possible.
I think it's really well put. The other thing I'd throw at you before we go here would be, from a mom's perspective here, and you obviously got your daughter back into daycare, but do some of these things change, and does the hesitancy and some of the paranoia subside if we don't have the spike? And I'm of course staying as optimistic as possible, and the numbers do stay low as Florida continues to be one of the states that is trying to reopen the economy pretty quickly. Does any of that subside if in a month we say, hey, really we didn't see that resurgence, that spike? Now we're talking mid-August. Hey, we still, this is pretty manageable. This is right about where the models say we'd be. Nothing is really concerning us. I mean, do you think that would be enough for some people to say, okay, we're definitely heading in, we really feel good about the direction we're heading in, and we can do this with schools?
Yeah, I think so. The numbers and what doctors and epidemiologists are saying, that's key here. That's how the government is supposed to be making decisions on how to reopen, and that especially applies to schools. I know that locally here in the Tampa Bay area, superintendents and school district leaders all across this community are looking at those numbers every single day. And that should make us feel confident. If we don't see that second wave, if we see these numbers under control, I think we can feel, again, cautiously optimistic about sending our kids back in. And of course, we also need to think about just one last thing that I'll bring up. We need to consider that adjustments may be made throughout the school year, because we don't know exactly what this virus is going to do. We don't know what this could look like even 6 months from now. We've already seen so many changes happening with, how we're handling and addressing this. So I think we've seen that school districts can be very fluid and adjust quickly. And we just kind of need to be prepared to go with the flow a little bit.
Yeah, again, well put, and I totally agree with you. I think we just need to be ready to adjust, and you can't take these as gospel, these CDC guidelines that we talked about today, because, like you said, they are disseminated, and then every district, really, on a district-by-district basis, is going to kind of implement them the way they see fit. So, but it is good that we have them, and we can talk about them, and I'm really happy that you made some time for me today, and we could get into it long form and discuss it. And it's nice to hear that you felt good about taking your daughter to daycare, and you liked what you saw there, because a lot of moms would want to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm just grateful. These teachers are, and I mean, just, gosh, teachers out there, if you are listening, you are a part of our community. We have realized, I think, through this, how much more you mean to families than just being your child's educator for the day. You are a part of it. You and the school communities are part of the village that we rely on to parent our children. And if that has been made abundantly clear to me, how grateful I am and how much I rely on them, I am so happy to be able to have my child back, even under these conditions. I'm just glad that she's able to be a part of that community again. And me too. really. And I think a lot of parents echo that.
Lauren Royzla, everyone. Please subscribe to the Rebound Tampa Bay podcast on Apple and Stitcher, and know that at ABC Action News, once we are starting to rebound here in Tampa Bay, there are steps you can take to find help for your family. Visit abcactionnews.com/rebound for all of those resources. I'm James Tully. Thanks for listening.